This is the Persistence of Vision podcast. Hi, welcome in. I am Clint Till, and each month on this podcast, I sit down with a creative professional and we talk about their career experiences and the lessons they've learned along the way. I'm super excited about my guest this month because I went to high school with this individual and I haven't talked to him in probably 30 years. We just sort of lost touch after I graduated high school, and we kind of get into that a little bit. And randomly came across his social media profile on Instagram. Said, "Oh, I haven't seen him in a while. What's he been up to these days?" Click on his profile. Lo and behold, he's a filmmaker. He's a director. He's living in LA. He's making a go of it. He has a career. Dallas Hallam is an independent filmmaker, a director, and a screenwriter. He has over 2 decades of experience navigating the independent film scene. He first broke out with his film Entrance, which we get into a little bit. He's also directed a film you may heard of, the Pact II, and we talk about that as well. He started out in the art department and then kind of worked his way into directing features. So we're going to talk a lot about that and the things that he learned through his career. It's a great conversation. I'm so glad you're listening. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Dallas Hallam. Holy cow.
It's some old men.
Oh, what happened? What happened to us?
Wow, how long has it been?
Dude, 30 years? I don't know.
Let me think. I mean, you're a year older than me, so I haven't seen you since you graduated. So I graduated.
Yeah, that was 30 years ago.
96, 30 years ago, yeah. Well, this is great. I really love the reconnection. This is wonderful. Because what I really remember about you and what I was always inspired by is when you were making a James Bond movie. And I helped you, shot on VHS, and I helped you do it, or I helped you on some of it. I think you probably had a lot more of it than what I was on for a couple days here and there. And I had never, you were like treating it like a real movie, figuring out how to get shots as if it was a real movie, shot on VHS. I think you were editing with just like two VCRs.
Yeah. Just 2 VCRs.
Yeah, and I was just like, wow, because back then when you're starting to think about becoming a filmmaker, or even not since back then, I think many of us suffer from this all the time. Is that you're just like, well, yes, I'm gonna do it as soon as this happens, or as soon as I get this piece of gear, as soon as I learn this piece of have this piece of knowledge, as soon as I have this size of budget, whatever it is. And it was just so cool. You were like, we're going to make a James Bond movie with stunts and everything else.
Oh, yeah, it was great. Because I was going to ask you, the next question was, did I recruit you to work on any of my movies in high school? Because I had recruited so many people.
Yeah, and I may have done a couple others, but the one that I really remember the James Bond, because there was all these creative decisions that felt so big. Like I remember shooting like out of the back of, maybe I was like, I think I was maybe in the back of a pickup truck and holding the camera so I could shoot you driving your car, just stuff like that. Just finding ways to get, Hollywood level shots just in high school. It felt so inspiring.
I think we all can imitate what we'd like, and growing up a big James Bond fan and then wanting to kind of figure out how movies work and what to do. I've just started kind of trying to emulate what I saw and kind of figured out limitations and what a VHS camcorder gives you and can't give you. But I remember like, okay, we couldn't blow up a vehicle in an actual Bond movie that I made. I remember Ryan Mitchell, a friend of mine, was one of the henchmen driving this truck that Bond had to blow up with like this rocket grenade thing that was embedded in his like ink pen. And so I'm like, well, I can't blow up a truck. So we went to like this empty lot and I just dubbed in this explosion sound effect. And I just had people from off camera, like throwing dirt and debris everywhere. And they had somebody like roll a tire through the frame, just like the tire had come off the truck and everything. So you just kind of figure out little fun ways to get around stuff.
And that kind of filmmaking produces better results than like, now, even at the level where if we were in high school now, you would be able to access all kinds of like special, quote unquote, special effects, but stuff that's just like
Yeah.
meant to make you feel like you're getting a Hollywood level of production. And yet, because it's not a Marvel movie, or even the Marvel movies, honestly, don't look that good anymore, but because it's not, being made by $1 million, you don't actually achieve it. And therefore, it looks just kind of crummy. And what I'm getting at is that the creative solution to keep it in camera always results in something that just like, is evergreen.
What happened with you after high school?
I always thought my whole life I thought I was going to move to New York City and live in New York City as a young person. And then right at the last minute, I decided to move to LA. And I like making spur of the moment decisions. And so I moved to LA and to get a job and working in movies and to try to become a director. And I got to LA, not really didn't have much of a plan. And that would be my first, tip to anybody out there who's young and trying to get started here, is like my whole plan was just that I was like a young Terrence Malick in the making. My genius was so great, I was going to get discovered, and I didn't have any sort of like actual thought about how to make a career. And so I did work in film and TV for many years, and I got lots of great experience, but I kind of got stuck. Like I got into the art department, and I ended up getting into a union, and I just did TV shows and films, and I was letting the universe like push me around without having a clear goal. So I was like moderately successful in LA, but I wasn't like becoming a director, which is what I wanted. So 10 years went by, and then I was right about to get married, and I had $6,000 in my bank account, and I was like, well, I can't get married and like spend all my money. So I better like, if I'm going to make a movie, I should do it now. So a buddy of mine from film school had just moved to LA like a year prior. And he made a movie, a zombie movie that I was the first AD on. And so I was like, hey, dude, be my first AD on this movie I want to make. So I set out to make this movie that, again, was not planned very well because the movie was way bigger than I had the budget for. But I had production meetings for it, and it was going to be a big, crazy horror art film. And then I casted for it, and I found the lead, and I went through the whole process. And then one day I just realized, like, oh shit, before I start spending money, like, this isn't real. This isn't going to happen. I can't make this movie. And I was looking at my buddy Pat, and I was like, out of the blue, we were both big fans of the Belgian filmmakers, the Dardon brothers. And out of the blue, I was like, how about this for a pitch? What if the Dardon brothers made a slasher movie? And I just like, it was my first time, and now I've become, I think, an expert in this mode of thinking, but it was my first time doing this doing this mode of thinking where I knew what the size of my box was, which was $6,000. And instead of trying to think outside of it, I was like, oh, let me try to like think way inside of it, not just a little bit inside of it, but like super comfortable inside of it. So this idea was to make this like social realist, gritty, raw, handheld, boots on the ground kind of neo-realist story following a girl around, but it was also a slasher movie. And so kind of and that movie, so that we ended up making that movie. Pat co-directed it with me, and that was called Entrance. And Entrance was the beginning of my career because we made the movie for nothing. It got into the Los Angeles Film Festival, and IFC bought it, and Stephen King reviewed it, and Stephen King in Entertainment Weekly, and it kind of like opened all the doors up. Anyway, that's like that gets you, post us knowing each other in high school up to like my first success. And I'll stop there because that was that was 2011. So that's still a long time ago.
I felt the same thing when you were talking about how you moved to LA, didn't really have a plan. Which I can understand a little bit. I didn't move to LA, but I got out of college and I wanted to, be in the commercial production world and start my own video production business there in Birmingham. And I could feel that because I also really didn't have much of a plan. It was like, hey, I want to start the video production business. I want to service these types of clients, and I want to do these commercials and have like, a small boutique of like 4 or 5 folks. And then just kind of like get my resume out there, get my demo reel out there, talk to people, pass out as many business cards as I could. But in retrospect, I should have like talked to other people who had done this before. Like, oh, you started a business. what worked for you? Oh, you're doing something similar to what I want to do. What should I avoid? But I didn't do any of that. And now, 30 years later, I'm looking back, like beating my head against the wall. Like, why didn't I do something as simple as just talk to people? Pick their brains a little bit. So I'm curious, like for you, the thought, like what was going through your mind when you talk about like you didn't have a plan, but then what you might say to others who are in their 20s who want to do what you did. What would you say to them specifically, some action items and things that you've learned and what you should have done back then?
Well, it's interesting because so like I got to LA and waited 10 years before I made that feature, which by the way, like, that waiting was more of the kind of waiting we were talking about at the beginning of the conversation. It was the waiting of like a budget or the right script or just, I don't know what, wait, I'm not sure even what, you're just waiting till like the stars align or something. But the same piece of advice kind of falls on both sides of that movie. So like the first thing I would say is that movie was I mean, $6,000 is a very little. I mean, I know this sounds privileged to say, but it's a very little amount of movie. A very little amount of money. So the first piece of advice is just do it. Like kind of like you making the James Bond movies. Like, why did I wait 10 years? Like the movie I made didn't require 10 years of my life to lead up to it. It was made at a moment of realizing that it was now or never. So I did it. But it was the size of that movie was a movie I could have made. So like, that's my first thing is like, just do it. And if you're not doing it, then write. Because another thing I never did. I mean, I'm 47 now, and now I've written dozens of screenplays but I didn't start seriously writing, except for like just, sketches and notebooks until that movie. And so that was in 2011 when we sold that movie. But like, that was a long time to have gone through film school and to be in LA, like claiming to want to be a filmmaker. But I guess I was just kind of waiting for someone to hand me a script. I'm not sure what I was thinking, but I wasn't writing every day, not seriously. And writing's not fun. So, or I guess maybe for some people it is, but I didn't enjoy writing for many years. And now I wrote a screenplay last year. So, mid 40s, I wrote a screenplay that I really enjoyed writing, for the first time. And so it can take a long time to get to a point where you really enjoy it. But I would say you have to, no one's going to know what you can do if you don't do it. The advice I'm trying to give is like, you have to make the work. You just can't wait. And so you've got to just do it. You have to make stuff and you have to show it to people. And if I had jumped to LA and was making more films and continuing to push myself as an artist and writing screenplays and just that, I spent 10 years working on TV shows and movies, and that was a good experience, but not really to be a director. It was a good experience to like know the ins and outs of everything. So just to wrap this point up, is it's kind of the same advice on the other. So I made this movie that had some success, but then I didn't follow that advice. Like after Entrance, the world was our oyster for a minute there, and we got a manager, and we were getting sent on meetings all over town, and we were then like ready to be big Hollywood directors. We were like pitching ideas to producers and just thinking that like me and my partner at the time, we were writing scripts that were way bigger. But what we didn't do was just make another $6,000 movie. But it took me another 10 years to remember that you just have to do the work.
What does your writing habit
My
right
writing
now?
habit right now is so simple, and it is just I write for an hour every morning. I get up earlier than the family, and I like the feeling that I'm fresh, I'm saturated from the world of dream, and I'm also not only am I saturated from having like been swimming in the ocean of dream, but I also am not clogged up with all the noise and BS of the world yet. And so I don't, because I used to like get up and like listen to the news first thing, and like, well, that's not really a habit for happiness. And so yeah, I started doing this, and it can feel kind of tough at first because you're really just chipping away. Like to write a whole screenplay, an hour a day every morning, it takes a long time. But if you do it over the course of years, the next thing you know, you've written 5 screenplays that way. So that's basically I basically do that up until, especially if something is really gripping me, then maybe I've got to like take a day and like, not do my day job, not do anything else, and actually like put in a 10-hour day of really wrapping it up. But for the most part, I would say an hour a day every single morning.
So when you came out and you made Entrance, what was the initial plan for Entrance, like post after it was finished and wrapped up and you had it out into the world? Because I know a lot of filmmakers now are questioning, hey, are film festivals worth it? What should we do with our film? Because you don't have those days in like the 90s when these indie films were getting bought
Yeah.
up at Sundance and other places and finding distribution. And so when you were talking earlier about like doing the work, making the stuff, having that habit, once a filmmaker who wants to follow your path, once they have their film, like for you guys with Entrance, what was the plan? What should a plan be for any filmmaker that's looking to, start a career?
Well, I think film festivals are worth it. They're not, if you're taking your film out to a film festival and your assumption is, I'm going to sell it and triple my, budget, get my budget repaid and then also make money. Well, that's not a good plan. I mean, maybe that could happen, but that is very rare now. But I would say that your film, you could just put your film up, through Film Hub, like get it out onto Amazon and Tubi and everything else. But then it's really just in this like sea of stuff. I mean, it's a little bit better than your film just going up onto YouTube to go that route, to use Film Hub and then get up onto all the platforms. But it's not that much better because it's still inside of this giant ocean of content. And so if you don't have just a couple of film festival laurels sitting on your poster, again, you don't have to have your film festival go to Sundance and like sell for $1 million, but just to have been vouched for by a couple of people, it really makes a big difference on having your film being taken seriously by others. And so the movie that I made a few years ago, I recently just signed a distribution deal with. We thought we were gonna. This movie's called Interaction, and we'll talk about it more in a moment. But of course, I had dreams of it playing at Sundance and South by all the big festivals. I didn't get into those festivals, but I did have a good run of about 8 festivals. And I think the fact that my press release has stuff from those festivals on it allows my film to be more competitive, even at the small level. So I do think film festivals are worth it. What I would say is that you got to set yourself a budget because film festivals can become very expensive very quickly, and don't exceed the budget. Don't, it's super easy to just be like, you get those emails from FilmFreeway every day and you're like, oh, okay, I guess I'll do this one more. I'll do this one. And the next thing you know, you've chipped away with little teeny costs and you've spent a couple $1,000 over what you thought you were going to spend in submission fees. You don't want to go that route. So I think you need to find some balance and have a budget set and have a timeline set of how long you're going to push at festivals. And then you could go to a plan B after. But I really think that it's important to try with festivals. I know people like to say film festivals are over, but I would say you should try.
You got your start, as you were saying, in kind of the art department. So maybe tell me a little bit about like the first break into the industry. You said you were working in TV and stuff, in art. Maybe that first big break, how you got in that world, but then also like maybe first big lesson you learned. It was kind of that eye-opening experience, like, oh, first big mistake or first big lesson learned on set that you've observed, and like, okay, I kind of my eyes are open now.
I'd heard about a PBS like Masterpiece Theater type movie that was being shot in Iowa. And so at the set decorator on the movie was a guy named Troy Peters, and he needed bodies. So he snatched my resume out of the machine and then called me up, and I went in for an interview, and I didn't even know what what an art department was. So to answer your question though, really the first major experience I ever had relative to working in a movie was that the art department drives around these big 5-ton trucks, and they're like big box trucks. So I was in a place in life where I wanted to be impressive, and I didn't want to say no to anybody about anything job-wise. So Troy handed me these keys and said, okay, you've got a series of pickups. And he looked at me and goes, you can drive one of these trucks? And I was just like, yeah, sure. And so I got into the driver's seat, and there was a dude with me who was a friend of Troy's, who was not in the movie world, but was just like working on this movie for fun. So he was sitting next to me, and I was like, my heart was beating so hard because I had never driven anything bigger than a Honda Civic. And I put the key in the ignition, and then I just was like, I have to like tell the truth here. So I turned to this guy and I was like, do you know how to drive this truck? Because he goes, no, man. So I started up the truck and then just really carefully edged out of that parking lot. And yeah, after a day of doing it and just like learning the trick of trusting my mirrors, I got pretty good at it. Years later, when I worked in LA on Punk'd and a bunch of hidden camera shows for years. And man, I would be driving, these were more like 3-ton cube trucks, but we would just be whipping those all over LA. And like, I got, you get so good at it. But I do remember that first moment of, and I don't know if this is like a lesson anybody should take. And maybe I shouldn't have driven the truck, but I just, I couldn't say no. I wanted to, be impressive. So I drove the truck.
I did the same thing when I was working as a set PA for the longest time. You don't want to appear as though you're not qualified because you're thinking, oh, I might get in trouble, or I might not be called back, or I might slow things down. So someone says, Clint, go grab this off the truck. I just would hustle over there and then try to figure out what that thing was, what it is. Like, I wouldn't stop and say, oh, what is that? What should I be looking for? Like, oh, yep, I'm going to go get it. And then run over to the truck and hop up there and look around like, okay, now I'm going to figure out what this is. And I don't know what that youthful arrogance is, when now I look back on it thinking, man, just ask the dumb question, ask what it is. You save time in the long run rather than taking the chance of bringing the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing. But yeah, I think there is something about like, say yes to everything, figure it out later, or get somebody to kind of help you along the way, just so you don't, like you said, you can impress and don't seem as though you're not qualified to do the job.
Yeah. And if I hadn't have said yes, then maybe I never would have driven one of those trucks. Like, I mean, there's always a first time, so I had to do it. And in the end, it was a lot of fun.
Part of what I'm doing is, at this point in my life, kind of assessing, okay, what did I learn from those experiences? It didn't quite, maybe this way back when didn't turn out the way I exactly wanted it to, but there's value in it. There's value in that experience from back then to what I know now, and what I learned from that experience helps me now. So
Certainly.
Probably the same thing for you, that those experiences that you had might not have been what you wanted to do. It wasn't directing, but it was those experiences that taught you something that now informs what you do today.
Well, yeah. And, and see, you and I also, we came up at a time, and this time's kind of coming back again now, but we came up at a time that really was like so enamored with like, how young can we find the next big filmmaker? And so like, P.T. Anderson is like, I don't know how old he actually was, but like, he's like 23 directing Boogie Nights or something like that. And there was a lot of examples like that when we were first kind of coming up. And so with every passing year, I would just get more and more freaked out that I wasn't a genius yet, or that I hadn't shown the world my genius yet. And I think it just turns out that some of us just need longer, I guess those 10 years, especially the movie I made last year that I'm like incredibly proud of. It probably just took 20 years of life to get to that movie. And it is what I can't, if I was to undo things differently, then I wouldn't have made that movie. So
what might you say to somebody who's putting a lot of pressure on themselves right now? Because I can feel that, like you get to a certain stage in life and you haven't reached what other people have reached, and you start to panic.
Sure. Yeah.
So what would you say to those that are putting pressure on themselves right now?
I would say, I hear you. I get it. And you're not alone, especially if you're middle-aged and you're still trying. You're not alone. I was always proud of my hubris in life. And I usually didn't rub people the wrong way. Occasionally I've had people in my life that maybe thought my level of I just was born with confidence that was probably not earned. And I think it was, for some people it was probably charming, and for others it was annoying. And I try to tell myself now, and I think it's true. I think that I'm entering into a phase where like a little bit of my insecurity that I've developed as I've gotten older and haven't like crossed over into the magical land of having quote unquote made it. I think it's making me a more real person. And so I think the first thing I would say is like, if you're having some anxieties or bad feelings, like know that it's all part of everything you feel is all part of the human experience, and like take a moment to kind of like take it into you, you know? I mean, as an artist, you want to use everything. And so shit, man, I've never felt like this before. Now I've got that. Now I have like, I'm a more complete, I feel like I'm a more complete human being at 47 because I have developed some insecurities than I was when I was just, you know, when I thought I was on top of the world, even though I hadn't earned it yet. So I think that's the first part of advice is like, I guess the first part of advice is like, man, we're all there. Like we all have it. And the second thing is embrace it. And then the third thing is do the work, you know, like you got to still do the work. And of course you probably have to have a normal job and you may have a family. I've got a normal job and a family and dogs and stuff and things to take care of. So there's always a balance too, that you have to strike between making money and surviving and doing all the stuff and then pursuing the dream still. Even if you could just put an hour in a day, you just have to do it. And that way you can find some balance.
Do you want your footage to look more like film? Well then, you need to try Dehancer, the premier film emulation plugin that brings authentic analog aesthetics to your digital workflow. Dehancer has over 60 iconic film profiles, 130 plus camera log options, realistic grain, halation, bloom, film damage, and advanced tools like LUT generators and color pipelines. Dehancer can improve the look of your footage with film-like texture. It's compatible with DaVinci Resolve, Adobe Photoshop, Lightroom, Premiere Pro, After Effects, Final Cut Pro, and more, plus mobile and online versions for on-the-go creativity. If you're interested in elevating the look of your color grade with genuine film emulation, you can get 10% off any Dehancer product by using my promo code VISION at checkout. Dehancer. Take a look, see for yourself, dehancer.com, and use my promo code VISION.
I think everyone's definition of the term made it. You know, he's made it. She's made it. I remember sitting in college in 1997 or 98 watching Matt Damon and Ben Affleck win their Oscar for Good Will Hunting. And I'm looking around the guys in my apartment going, hey, these guys are like just a little bit older than us. Like we could do this, you know, and then we actually tried to write a screenplay together that never went anywhere, you know, but yeah, you do get the sense like, oh, I can quote unquote make it. But then I think to myself now, like, what does that mean? You know, it's different. I realize now in my career that I didn't make it in the sense of what high school Clint would have thought making it really meant. But in every conceivable usage of that term, I've made it. You know, I get to work in a field that I've always enjoyed doing. I get to work and produce direct nationally broadcast commercials like I wanted to do. It's a little bit different than what I envisioned, but I'm doing it, you know, and I've got a home life, which a lot of folks might not have because they're working, you know, 100 hours a week or whatever. So I think it's important to remember, like, because I do the same thing, put pressure on myself even at 48, thinking I've never directed a feature film. Would I love to do that? Yeah. And so then you're like, oh my gosh, I'm almost 50. I've never done X, you know, and I think it's a good reminder to kind of take a breath, like you were saying, and just say that you're not alone. There are other, but the term making it can mean something that you don't sometimes think it really means.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I think too that when we look at people around us, we have assumptions about, I mean, especially being out here in LA, like there's actors that I know and other people, other directors or producers that seem so successful because of a few things on IMDb, but you know, money gets used up quick, and our idea of what may, I mean, there's really very few people that would fit the kind of pie in the sky version of making it. When in reality, what's shifted for me as I've gotten older is like, you know, when I was first coming out of film school, I guess I wanted to make movies as big and as artistically important as The Thin Red Line. That'd be like a good benchmark of like, I want to make movies this big, but that are also this challenging. And there's like, The Thin Red Line, that's a once in a lifetime movie. I mean, Hollywood's not going to pump out those kind of movies, you know. But now my definition is much more humble, and it's just to like, I do want to find some contentment with what I do every day. And like you were saying, I mean, I work in making media every day. There is some happiness in that. But if I could just make a living, if I could make enough money to say I'm making a living, a basic living, doing exactly what I want to do, that would be what making it would be for me. You know, to be where like, okay, I can shift away. I love my corporate clients. They're very nice and all, but to be able to shift away from that and not looking to buy a mansion. I mean, I'm in a rented house here. I'm not looking to go to this other like level of financial wealth. But if I was able to make movies and be able to, you know, survive financially, that would be making it at this point. It doesn't, what I'm trying to say is it doesn't
Oh
have to
yeah.
be Christopher Nolan at this point, or even P.T. Anderson for that matter. It could
Yes.
literally just be that I'm surviving doing what I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah. That would be great. I would love to go from directing one film and go right into directing another film. And even in this space, even in the podcasting space
Stop.
or writing and publishing online, you know, I see other podcasters that are doing things similar and they're quote unquote,
Well, they figured out how to
making it. And like, why don't,
monetize it. Yeah, but there's some
yeah, why don't I have the listeners? Why don't I have this audience? Why are only 50 people opening up my newsletter that I send out? You know, but it's just like you said earlier, it's the doing, it's the creating, it's just showing up and making things. And there's some, for me, there's some fulfillment in that, regardless of, you know, who all listens or watches or reads or whatever. But I'd be curious to know, in your career, what has been like the biggest disappointment? Because you said earlier when we started the conversation that there have been plenty of opportunities where you felt as though you were kind of over the hump and something happened and it didn't happen for you. So maybe it's something that was really, you know, taught you something really important.
Right after we had, you know, the first little bits of success with Entrance, my partner and I at the time wrote a script. We had secured top tier talent and were in talks with financiers, and it was going to be like $3 to $5 million. And like, this would have been the making it, you know, especially if the movie had been a success, because then it would lead to more opportunities. The thing about living in LA, I mean, there's a million stories of this exact thing falling apart, and it just fell apart. And it fell apart like a house of cards, where it was just like there was a little part of the deal that kind of got messed up here, and then some uncertainties from financiers over here, and all of a sudden it just collapsed. That was 15 years ago, and I haven't come in as close. Like that was like as close, being in rooms with high profile people and money people, and like really feeling like this is about to happen. That falling apart would be my biggest disappointment. But, you know, going through something like that's really good. I mean, it thickens the skin in a way that, you know, I wish my skin had been that thick earlier. It was a healthy thing to go through. So that'd be my biggest disappointment. That's one that not everybody can share, because even getting up to that point is still so rare to be in those rooms. And that something that I can share that's a little bit closer to I think our experiences working, you know, at independent film is, after Pat and I made Entrance, we got hired to make a sequel to a horror movie. So we had gotten an offer to go and pitch to make a sequel to a horror movie called The Pact. And The Pact is a really, really good independent horror movie. You can watch it on Shudder. If you have anybody out there has Shudder. Great movie directed by a filmmaker named Nicholas McCarthy. And the producers wanted to make a sequel to it. And I guess he must have passed. So we were fresh off of like the Stephen King review, and this would have been, what was cool about this is this would have been like this was like a $500,000 movie if it went. And an entrance by comparison was $6,000. So we developed a pitch for it, and they were just like, wow. Like basically they called us back in for a follow-up, and they were like, that pitch was amazing. You got the job. But here's the funny part about it. They're like, that pitch got you the job, but we don't want to make that movie. And so that was the first like red flag that I should have like been noticing. Anyway, from that moment on, we wrote a good script. but the script went through notes and revisions. And then we had some other issues happen in the production. Like there was an actress who kind of wrote a whole subplot around someone returning from the previous film, and she didn't want to be in the movie. So we had to rewrite a giant chunks of the script at the last minute. But the main thing that I would get at is this, is like, when I think back to the coffee shop meetings with the original director, and he would talk about how hard it was working with this production on the first movie and how much headbutting there was. And when I was talking to him about that, I just kind of assumed that he was like shit talking. You know what I mean? But when I think back to Nicholas, you know, talking about how difficult it was working on it, but how he pushed and he fought, and they fought. The thing is they produced a good movie. When Pat and I made the sequel, we were like, we didn't fight at all. We were like, we thought we needed to, because we wanted to make more movies with these producers. We were like, let's make this the best experience they've ever had. And they would tell us on the daily, like, this is the most fun, the nicest time we've ever had making a movie. Those are red flag words. No one should ever tell you no producer should ever tell you this is the most fun I've ever had making a movie, because you are doing something wrong. This is what I'm getting at, is like one of my single greatest lessons in filmmaking. Outside of the first lesson is do the work. The second lesson is you don't have to be like a famous asshole. You don't have to be like I love Michael Mann movies, but supposedly people say he's like a tyrant on set. I've never worked on a Michael Mann set. I don't know, but I think everybody listening gets the point. The example of like the tyrannical director. It doesn't have to be like that to make good art, but what it can't be is like, yeah, we're having fun. I'm making these producers happy. Like if they have bad ideas, you got to fight them. You know, you can't just like figure out how do we make this work so everybody stays happy? So like when we finished making the Pact II, like what we didn't realize is over the course of many months, and I don't think the producers realized this either, they would give us these notes, and the notes kept shifting the script in different ways that were kind of making the whole process. It would take all the color got kind of chipped out of it. And there was a review in the New York Times a month after the movie came out. Like they called it like a crafty or cannily made remake. And I was like, for the first time, I have made this movie. I put blood, sweat, and tears in this movie for months. I gave it everything I had and never realized that it was basically a remake. I don't know how it got through this whole process. And it was because of these, I don't think the producers even meant to, it was like on a subconscious level. I'm not sure they even meant to be doing this, but every note they gave shifted it more to this direction, where by the end of the whole process, it was literally like you watch these movies back to back, and like one is great and the other is like a subpar remake of the first. And I'm here to say this for the first time in front of anybody. Like we didn't set out to do that. It was just a weird thing that happened throughout the production and it happened because we weren't fighting. We were so afraid to butt heads that we didn't push back, and we weren't ever just like, this is not good. And we didn't want to have the reputation. We didn't want them to like the way that they would talk about the last director and how much they fought with him. We didn't want that. So anyway, if I was to go back and change it, I wouldn't have been a tyrant. I wouldn't have like burned any bridges or made it a bad experience for anyone involved, but I would have fought harder to make sure I was making an actual great movie as opposed to like treating it as the job. And that's kind of how I was treating it. And the truth is that the movie came out and like nobody cared about it. And then like it kind of sucked my career, you know, for like another decade. So if you're given an opportunity, if you're like in the middle of an opportunity, you have to treat it, whether it's the Pact II or whether it's like just some like POS sequel, like, or the sixth movie in a franchise, some straight to video thing that seems schlocky. You need to treat it like Citizen Kane. That's the trick. And I wish that we had.
That's a really interesting point because it feels so counterintuitive. Like, of course you want people to enjoy the experience and have fun on set and enjoy making this movie. And it kind of reminds me of when I was freelancing and trying to get my business off the ground. Like I was so afraid of bad word of mouth getting around. Like if I didn't bring it, and if this client had one negative thing to say, it could ruin my opportunities for future work. So I totally get that. But it's very interesting because so many times we try to avoid creative impasses and we try to avoid butting heads with folks. And it's a great perspective to think about how much you should, in fact, fight for what you really
But
believe
yeah,
in and
the
what you
only thing
want
that
to do.
matters is the result. Is the only thing that matters is the movie, the movie, the TV show, the commercial, whatever the final product is. All the other stuff is forgotten about when you're looking at that result. And is this worth a damn? You know, and if it's not, that's a problem.
Yeah.
But that's all that really matters in the end, and you've got to fight for it.
So what happened after the Pact II? Did that kind of kind of alluded to the fact that it set you back a
Yeah.
little bit
Well,
career
so
wise?
that big giant opportunity came about right after the Pact II, because there's a period of time in between, you know, things coming out, and it wasn't like the Pact II was some reviled movie. I mean, but what it didn't do is it just didn't provide the next thing. That's all. And because it wasn't a good movie, because people didn't care about it, it didn't really make, you know, it made some okay money in rentals, but it didn't set the world on fire in any way whatsoever. It didn't provide for the next step. And so, like, basically, because it didn't provide for a next step, and because our big giant opportunity fell apart, and I had just had a second child and was very much a family person at that point, I really had to make a living. And so that's where all my energies went into the corporate world for a while, because it was kind of like, you know, I couldn't make I couldn't spend my own money on anything, and nobody was offering me anything. So I had to go make money. And so I don't know if I would view any of it as a misstep, but it's like, you know, if I hadn't started a family, then life would have been different. But of course I would never even dream of changing the way my life has turned out. But it's just an observation that, going back to the very beginning of everything, and again, I don't believe in changing your life. You have to embrace your fate. But if I was to begin advice to others, I would say, going back to the very beginning, there was just no plan. And we talk about going back to the first missteps are all connected to not having a plan. And so I think if I, from the beginning, had a better plan, then I could have weathered these storms better.
Even today, how do you deal with the uncertainty that comes with this industry? You know, you
Yeah.
got your paying corporate work, of course, but then if you want to continue to make your own films, so in a volatile world of, you know, production and filmmaking, all that, like how do you handle the uncertainty of it all?
Oh man, I don't know. Yeah, it's there are days when I don't handle it. Like, I feel pretty good today. You know, I just got back from a big giant corporate shoot, and I've got a mountain of footage to deal with, and plenty of work to do. But yeah, there are days when the uncertainty of it can feel pretty crushing. And what I here's some advice that I don't take yet, but that I'd like to take. I have a friend who's an artist, who's a really, really great. His name's David Fishel, and I went to University of Iowa with him, and he's a really great visual artist. And I know he'd like to be like, we keep bringing up the term making it. I know he'd like to like be, you know, like us all, like at some higher level of working, but he's like the one visual, he makes short films and music videos and visual art. But there's very few of us, and I'm not like him yet, but I'd like to be, where it's like the doing of the art is the thing. And so if I could get there where I was getting as much, like when I'm writing in the mornings, where I wasn't always thinking about this, I'm working on a script that's meant to be for a movie that hopefully will like create this other opportunity or open this door, or everything is like for something else as opposed to the thing in itself. That would be how I would try to have better mental health, is just like to find myself enjoying the process more than being so focused on the outcomes.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic advice. What is the next thing that what's on the table for you coming up next
So,
in the
okay,
film world?
so I had a really great, well, I'm in LA now. During COVID, my family and I moved to upstate New York, and we spent 5 years living on a farm in upstate New York before moving back to Los Angeles. So, while I was there, I had a same kind of moment like I had back in 2010, where I was like, oh crap, I'm getting older. And so I made another movie. And what's cool about it is, so this one I directed by myself. I didn't have a partner on it. And it is called Interaction, and it's made self-finance. So it's made for like $10,000 on a credit card. But what's cool about it is that it stars the same actress from my previous film. And so we got to work together again. And I think it's really good. It's a horror movie, but I'm really proud of it. And it ended up playing at like 8 festivals and winning some awards. And that movie I actually have not announced this anywhere, so this will be a scoop on your podcast. But that movie it's been picked up by Antenna Releasing, who's a new kind of boutique distribution company that is focused on doing what's right with the filmmakers they work with, and they have a big focus on actual theatrical screenings and physical media. So they want to put out this movie and possibly do some double features with the one from 15 years ago, which is kind of a neat thing because they really sit well together. But they want to put this movie Interaction that I just made a couple of years ago. They want to put it out. So next year it'll be out on Blu-ray. And
Fantastic.
On top of that, I'm just kind of I'm like back in LA now. I'm back where I was like after I made that movie that I sold in 2011. So I'm back at that point where I've had another success. But what I'm doing differently this time is that I've got those like bigger budget irons back in the fire. But instead of putting all my eggs, I'm going to mix a bunch of metaphors here, and putting all my eggs into those irons baskets. I'm preparing for another small movie at the same time. So and more than one. So I'm all my energy and faith is in these little teeny movies that I'm preparing for, even though I do have the traction again on the big stuff. So I'm just trying to kind of ride both at the same time now. And so I'm getting ready to make something. It's kind of like a noirish, dreamy nightmare horror movie that I'm preparing to make. Hopefully by the fall.
And you're learning a little bit something from what you experienced before. So you're doing the work, continue to do the small things as you wait for the bigger stuff to hit.
Yeah, I can't wait anymore. I mean, life is so short, and I'm approaching 50.
Mm-hmm.
You're a year ahead. So no more waiting.
It comes at you fast.
No more waiting.
Yeah. So what are you listening to or watching or reading right now that's kind of inspiring you, that you're really liking, that you're kind of into right now?
I got a really cool one. I'm like deep in this series of 50. There's 15 or 18. There's a crime and suspense author named Ross MacDonald who was like the heir to, so like if you've got Dashiell Hammett led to Raymond Chandler as like the first two faces on the Mount Rushmore of this kind of stuff. Everything then kind of goes cold up until you get into like the 80s or 90s, or appears to go cold. But in between those two periods of people liking hard-boiled fiction, there was this writer named Ross MacDonald who kept putting books out that are not widely read anymore, but that are amazing. And so he has, I can't remember if it's 15 or 18, but a series of books with this detective named Lou Archer. And I have just been plowing through these books. It's not my normal métier because I am a horror person, but I am loving these Lou Archer detective stories. So I've read like 9 of them. Really inspiring in terms of the movie that I'm working on right now, which is it begins its life as something akin to like a hard-boiled thing, like a noirish hard-boiled thing, but then it devolves into something else.
If people want to follow you and connect with you to keep up with what you're doing, where's the best place to find you?
I think Instagram. If anything happens to me in terms of career stuff, I will post about it, and so that would be the place to go.
And for the films we talked about today, Entrance and the Pact II, where can people? Pact II is on Shudder.
The Pact II is on Shudder, and Entrance, it is available on something called Philo, but you have to watch it with ads. So you can rent it on Apple TV, or like Amazon or whatever. The only thing about watching it with ads is that there's a couple, I'm going to not spoil anything, but there's a couple of like uncut shots in it that would be like a bummer if they got cut with an ad. So like, if you're listening to this and you are like, I'm curious about this movie, but I don't want to have to pay for it on iTunes or Amazon, like just direct message me. And like, I mean, I probably shouldn't. I'll send you a link.
Okay. Great.
You don't want to pay for it, but don't watch it on like Philo or whatever it's on, or I don't think it's on Tubi, but so there's that. Yeah, and then there's another movie that's totally awesome that I worked on that I should plug called Southbound.
Okay.
And it is an anthology horror movie. I co-wrote one of the segments. I ended up not co-directing it with my old collaborator only because we had too much going on at the time. But he and I like had all these scripts due to different studios at the time. But that's a really great anthology film that a bunch of awesome people worked on, like the dudes who made the new Scream movies worked on it, and then David Bruckner, who made the new Hellraiser movie, worked on it. And then Pat and I, our piece is kind of cool because the star of it is the lead singer from the Jesus Lizard, which is really cool. And he's actually an amazing actor who I am developing a script for right now that I'm hoping to work with again soon.
Excellent. Well,
okay.
That's it.
It was so great.
It's been
so
awesome.
great reconnecting.
I hope you enjoyed that time with Dallas. It was just super fun to reconnect with him and listen to all the things that he's been up to over the past 30 years. I tell you, time really gets away from you. You can always check out what I'm doing online at linktree.com/Clint Till. That's where you'll find everything that I'm doing. If you want to subscribe to this podcast, you can do that on any one of your favorite podcast players. If you don't mind, go rate, leave a review for the show. And you can also subscribe to my newsletter on Substack, clinttill.substack.com. Thanks so much for listening. This has been the Persistence of Vision podcast.